Welcome to the video for chapter 11.5. We are going to finish up the chapter on eukaryotic parasites and eukaryotic pathogens. So the last thing we're going to talk about is invertebrate parasites. So things like helminths and arthropods. So worms and ticks pretty much is what we're going to be talking about. But first, a review question. So review question number 1 asks, which of the following characteristics is typical of a eukaryotic cell, but would not be found in a prokaryotic cell? A, ribosomes, B, cell membrane, C, the Golgi body, or D, a cell wall. Okay, so take a minute, think about the question, think about what we've learned in past chapters, and let's see if you can find the answer. Okay, so the answer for this is C, the Golgi body. Okay, so if you remember back to when we talked about prokaryotic versus eukaryotic cells, we know that all the cells, no matter the type, all have ribosomes and they all have cell membranes. So A and B are automatically out. So that leaves C and D. Well, most eukaryotic cells outside of plants don't have cell walls. Okay, and we know that prokaryotic cells have cell walls. They have those peptidoglycan layers. So D is out. So the answer is C. Okay, so in chapter 11.5, we are going to talk all about the invertebrate parasites. So your section objectives include being able to describe the parasitic cycles of worms, including roundworms, flukes, and tapeworms. You need to be able to describe the parasitic cycles of arthropods, including ticks, mites, and the blood-sucking insects. Now, with 11.5, this is a little bit weird, because 11.5 is usually not talked about as something that's microscopic, right? It's not really a microbe. We can see these with our naked eye, but they've been historically included in the field of microbiology because there's aspects about them that are microscopic. So both helminths and arthropods are going to have eggs that are microscopic, and this is why they're included in a microbiology course like this. Okay, so let's start talking about our invertebrates. Okay, so the first category of invertebrate parasites that we're going to talk about are the helminths. So helminth is just a fancy word for parasitic worm. We have 3 types of helminths. We have the nematodes. We refer to them more around here as roundworms. We have the trematodes, which are flukes. Okay, we have the cestodes, which we know more commonly as the tapeworms. Okay, so each of these have their own defining characteristics. One of them is, for roundworms, is they're cylindrical, hence why they're called a roundworm. Okay, they're pretty much just a cylindrical digestive tube that ends in an anus. There's not much that's complicated about nematodes. Trematodes, on the other hand, are oval-shaped flatworms. Okay, so they're also a digestive tube, but they end in a cecum, so there's no outlet. Okay, and what's really cool about trematodes is that they're hermaphrodites. So hermaphrodites are things that are born with both female and male reproductive organs. Even though they have both organs, they can't fertilize themselves. They need another fluke in order to do that. But it's pretty interesting because we have different types of hermaphrodites out there. But the main characteristic that connects them all is that they have both the male and female reproductive organs. Now, cestodes or tapeworms, these are a little bit different. They are always a parasitic flatworm. Okay, what they do is they absorb nutrients through their skin. And what's really kind of gross and a little bit disturbing about tapeworms is that they have a weird head. It's what we call a sucker head. Okay, so it's going to have teeth and suckers in order to attach itself to your intestinal walls or any of the organs that it comes in contact with along the way. Okay, this is how they cause a lot of damage, actually. And then attached to that head are going to be long segments, so they're going to make their tail. Okay, so, and this is going to also be hermaphroditic because they're also going to contain both male and female reproductive organs. Okay, so those are our 3 types of parasitic worms. I would know what each of these are. Okay, know what they mean. Know that cestodes are tapeworms. Know that flukes are the trematodes. Roundworms are the nematodes. Okay, so let's talk about a case study, and let's talk about how we encounter these in the health field. Now, our case history is what was called Dottie's itch. Okay, so Dottie is the 2-year-old daughter of a Texas petroleum executive, so an oil baron. Okay, so they have a pretty large family. They have 4 children and 3 dogs. And being a Texas oil baron, Dottie's family is pretty rich. So they have things like nannies and maids and butlers. Okay, so Dottie often goes outside with her brothers and sisters and plays with the dogs and the ranch animals. The thing is they started to notice that Dottie had a habit of scratching her bottom. Okay, her nanny thought that was pretty uncouth, so it was a habit that she was trying to break Dottie of. Okay, but she really didn't check any further than say, oh, hey, don't do that. Okay, so Dottie's mom is an attorney for the petroleum firm. Okay, so she noticed that it started with Dottie scratching her bottom, but it had been spread to other members of the family. They all had the similar habit. Okay, and this all was happening when they were kind of in the middle of a humid summer, so they're all uncomfortable. Okay, so one evening, Dottie's nanny was out, so her mom is the one that actually had to change her diaper. Now, when she was changing her diaper, she noticed that there's these long white thread-like worms in her diaper. Okay, so this kind of got them a little bit disturbed, as it would any of us. So her pediatrician, so Dottie's mom took Dottie to the pediatrician. So the pediatrician found not only the pinworms, but also pinworm eggs. Okay, so the way we check for worm eggs is pretty low techie. It's a very, very simple test. Literally what the doctor did is got a piece of Scotch tape like I have on my desk and literally put it on Dottie's anus. This is what is called the tape test. Okay, so then they put the tape on there, let it sit for a minute, and then pulled it off, and then took the tape and looked at it underneath a light microscope on a slide. And they saw the pinworm eggs there on the tape. So it's a little low techie, but it's still a very effective method of diagnosing somebody with tapeworms. Okay, and this is what was causing Dottie's bottom to itch. Okay, so once they discovered these pinworms, the physician prescribed mebendazole, which is a microtubule inhibitor for not just Dottie, but for the entire family. Because since other family members were also scratching their bottoms, this has spread through the family. Okay, so they also included the nanny and the maid who served dinner, because one of the things that causes the spread of these worms is unclean hands. Okay, so the nanny and the maid were probably changing Dottie's diaper, didn't wash their hands very well, and then went and served dinner. Okay, and then spread it to the whole family, which is a little bit gross. Okay, so because the children were playing with the dogs, Dottie's mom was like, asked the pediatrician, what about the dogs? Do we need to deworm them as well? And she was told by the pediatrician that was one of the interesting things about pinworms is dogs can't carry them. Although they do have other worms that can then be transmitted to humans, the dogs aren't actually a worry in this case. Okay, so the thing about this drug is that it only affects mature worms. Okay, so they took a first treatment and killed all the mature worms that were in their systems, and then they had to take another dosage 2 weeks later because all those eggs and stuff that was causing the itching, well, they've now grown to mature worms and they needed to be taken care of. And this cycle repeated over and over and over again. Okay, so ultimately it took 6 months of these treatments to get this pinworm infection out of their house. So it was it's a pretty intensive schedule for treatment, and it takes a long time. Okay, so one of the interesting things about helminths is their life cycle. Okay, so the specific type of pinworm that Dottie and her family had was Enterobus vermicularis. Okay, and they're transferred by the fecal oral route, so from unclean, poopy hands. So what's going to happen is, here we have Dottie. So we have Dottie here. So she is going to ingest these pinworm eggs. Okay, so this is what the pediatrician and the clinical microbiologist saw on that tape test for Dottie. Okay, so they're going to travel through her digestive system, and they're going to get into her small intestine, where they're going to hatch, and the larvae are going to start to grow. Okay, so they're going to grow and they're going to mature while feeding off the nutrients in the digestive tract. So once the female worms come to maturity, what they're going to do is they're going to need to lay their eggs. So they're going to start to migrate through the intestinal tract towards the anus. Okay, and once they get to the anus, that's where they're going to release their eggs. Okay, so and this was what was causing that itchiness for Dottie and her family, because the itchiness was going to cause them to scratch, which is going to promote the transmission of eggs from them to other people. Okay, so there is a evolutionary meaning behind this itchiness. Okay, and if you aren't cleaning your hands, you're going to easily transmit them. Okay, the scary thing about things like pinworms is that a large majority of the world population is probably infected with them, because they are so hard to get rid of, and they're not something that you really see often unless you're changing a young child's diaper, because they're not immediately something that you're going to see. Okay, so the next helminth we're going to talk about are the tapeworms. Now, tapeworms are interesting because they are transmitted as larvae in uncooked meat. So this is one of the reasons why we have a lot of safety protocols at restaurants, because meat have to meet a certain temperature requirement in order to kill these larvae and the eggs, so that we don't transmit tapeworms. Now, depending on the type of meat that you are eating, they're going to have different species of these helminths, so of these cestodes. Okay, so the helminth found in pork is Taenia solium, beef is Taenia saginata, and fish has their own special category, and is a particularly diabolical tapeworm. From all the readings I've had to do about tapeworms in the past, these are the ones that get the biggest. Okay, so I am not even going to say their scientific name. The ones in fish are just diabolical, just know that. Okay, so all cestodes, all tapeworms, are composed of two parts. We have this head. Okay, so we see the hooks, these teeth. These are going to help them anchor to your intestinal wall. And then we have these suckers, which are going to further attach them to the wall. Okay, and then they're going to grow in these segmented pieces, and they're going to get longer and longer and longer. So on average, tapeworms that are found in most humans grow between about 2 meters, so about 6 feet, and 15 meters long, which is about 45 feet. Okay, so they just keep adding more and more segments as they grow. Now, the disturbing thing is there is a world record for longest tapeworm found in a human, and it's from a man in India, and his tapeworm was 82 feet long, which is a pretty long tapeworm and a little bit gross. Now, tapeworms are things that we've known about for quite a long time. In fact, in the mid-1800s, in the Victorian era in England, they were treated as a weight loss treatment. Okay, because this is what helminths do. This is what the tapeworms do. Is once they get into your digestive tract, into your intestines, they are going to absorb all the nutrients. So they're actually going to make you hungrier, but you're not going to gain weight because it's going to be the one consuming all your nutrients. Okay. Um, the reason why it started as a weight loss treatment is because in the Victorian era, the beauty standard for women was a little bit weird. You were considered truly beautiful as a woman if you, this always makes me laugh, if you looked like a tuberculosis patient. Okay, they wanted extremely pale skin, they wanted dilated eyes, and red cheeks and lips from not the makeup of the time, and of course a very tiny waist. So in order to attract a husband, rich Victorian ladies would literally eat the tapeworms in order to control their weight. Now the thing is, yes, they lead to weight loss. In fact, the tapeworm weight loss trend tried to make a comeback in 2019. Consuming tapeworms for weight loss is banned by the FDA, by the way. So the thing is, yes, they consume your nutrients. Yes, they help you lose weight, but they also cause a lot of other problems. So some of the symptoms are kind of run-of-the-mill: abdominal pain, cramps, fever, malaise, weakness, diarrhea. They can actually lead to bacterial infections, even though they are a eukaryote. But then you get to the weird and very terrible side effects of the tapeworm, and that's like neurological problems. Okay, they can cause dementia, and which is terrible. They also have caused intestinal and bile duct blockages, so they cause things to back up. And there's just a lot more symptoms than that. Those are just the main ones. So I would not recommend a tapeworm for weight loss anytime soon. Okay, so this is our life cycle of a tapeworm. Let me find where's my little guy? Okay, right there. Okay, so one of the ways they are transmitted is by the fecal oral route. So first up, they have to get into a host. So we have our cow here eating grass, so it's going to ingest the eggs. Okay, the eggs are going to hatch, and they're going to take their embryos and develop them in the muscle tissue. They're actually going to create this cyst. Okay, then cow is butchered for meat. Meat is undercooked. Okay, so the cyst is not broken open and the tapeworm is not killed. Okay, so we have now introduced it to our intestinal system. Okay, so it's going to mature. This is the hooks and the sucker. Okay, so it's going to attach to the surface of the intestine and its epithelium. Okay, and it's going to continue to grow and add segments. Okay, there's going to be segments called proglottids that this is where the eggs are going to develop. Okay, and so as it grows, it's going to release these segments full of eggs. Okay, and those eggs are going to travel through your digestive tract. Okay, they can go to the muscle, the brain, the liver, forming cysts there. Okay, and then these segments are going to pass through your digestive tract and out, and then they're going to be available to transfer to somebody else all over again by the fecal oral route. Now, this is from our textbook. This is not a microscopic image. This is a real tapeworm. Okay, so you can see the head and you can see the segmented regions. Okay, this is what it really looks like. They're a little bit gross. Kind of cool, but gross at the same time. Okay, so that is the life cycle and infection cycle of helminths, specifically tapeworms. Now, we're going to leave the helminths behind. We're not really going to talk about the roundworms. Okay, what we're going to talk about last is the arthropods. Okay, so these are going to be the insect vectors that we talk about. So these are going to be invertebrate animals with an exoskeleton and jointed appendages. Okay, so this is going to be our ticks. These are all sorts of different pathogens that ticks can transfer to humans. We're going to have our mosquitoes with the malaria plasmodium that we talked about in 11.3. We have different types of flies, fleas. They're going to transfer things. So like we have our sand fly that's going to transfer leishmania from the main case history that we talked about at the first of the chapter. We have this fly that is going to transmit Trypanosoma brucei. These are the tsetse flies from Africa. They cause African sleeping sickness. Okay, and then we had just quite a few different types of arthropod vectors, so insect vectors. A lot of arthropod parasites are free living. Some of them are only vectors. Some are what we call ectoparasites. So ectoparasites mean that they are growing and they're attaching to the outside of your skin. They're not inside. So they're extracellular parasites. Okay. So a lot of these are going to be either using the host for blood meals, or they're going to use them to inject their eggs into the host. Okay, the arthropods for microbiology also include arachnids, so spiders and dust mites and other types of mites, but mostly dust mites. So they're kind of a very large and diverse group. So let's just talk about some examples. I would know the tsetse flies, so it's spelled T-S-E, T-S-E. The tsetse flies are going to be what transfers African sleeping sickness. So an example of an ectoparasite would be something like lice. So something that's living on your skin and pretty much being a nuisance would be an ectoparasite. Okay, one of our most common arthropod insect vectors are ticks. Okay, so we have a tick here in this picture that has recently taken a blood meal. It is bloated on blood. It's kind of gross. So ticks are the main vector for Lyme disease. Okay, so they're going to transfer different Borealis pathogens. So Borrelia burgdorferi is going to be the pathogen that causes Lyme disease. They can transfer other types of bacteria, but they can also transfer protozoa and viruses that cause these diseases in humans. So the tick, Ixodes scapularis, is going to take a blood meal from an infected deer, going to jump off, and it's going to be picked up by a human, where it's going to take another blood meal, and it's going to release some of this pathogen, so some of the Borrelia burgdorferi bacteria, into the bloodstream and allow it to grow there. Now, Lyme disease has a very characteristic symptom that tells you have been bitten by a tick. So you're going to get this target-shaped rash. So this is bad. If you ever see a target-shaped rash on you or a family member, you really need to go to the hospital really quick to get treatment. Okay, so with ticks, they're going to be our blood meal vectors, so they're only going to transfer disease when they are feeding. Now, we have the insect parasites. These are all going to be six-legged, and they're going to have wings or no wings. So lice are what we call a wingless ectoparasite. Okay, so they're going to feed on things on your skin. Okay, so there's a lot of different parasites out there. We're only talking about a select few. If you are interested in parasites, there's this there's this podcast that Dr. Burrows recommends. It's called This Week in Parasites or Parasitum, and they go into a lot of depth and talk about a whole range of different parasites. So if you are interested in this, that's a way to get more information. Okay, so that is 11.5. Chapter 11 is done. We're going to move on to chapter 12 and talk about viruses in the next video.